Hey everyone, thank you. So I'm CEO and co-founder of Obelisk Systems, and I guess I'm going to tell you the story of my business. So in 2015, I was at the University of Newcastle as an electrical engineer, and me and my friend decided that after finishing our final year projects that we'd start up a small company. His final year project was about making cube satellites. So cube satellites, for those that don't know, are a small microsatellite, and they've become really popular lately because we've been launching a lot more into space. And whenever you launch something into space, say like a really big satellite, there's always like little bits of room around those satellites. And so some people came up with the idea that if we can fill up that room with like little cube satellites, that would be a really good use of that space. And that's pretty much just made them a super popular thing in that area. So we thought no one else is doing this in Australia. No one's making hardware for the space industry in Australia, at least for that small sector, and that we could get into that. So we started doing some like little designs. We started talking to some people, and pretty early on, we found someone to seed fund us, which was really amazing. It gave us the opportunity to move into an office with them as well and start trying to make stuff. So the first 6 months of the company were pretty relaxed in a lot of ways. We were just trying to like play around with designs, play around with a lot of equipment that we had, trying to like talk to people about projects and things. And a couple of projects looked like they might have been coming up. It's space in this at that point in time, because it was early 2016, it was kind of just getting off the ground in Australia. So there's a group called Delta V, and they're like the kind of non-government space hub in this country. And they were just kind of getting onto their feet. So we were one of the early people involved with them. And it was pretty good. Like in terms of like the potential was there for a lot of partnerships and a lot of projects that could possibly happen, but a lot really wasn't moving. And we were on seed funding, and we were kind of looking to put a product out there, and we were making some initial products. So the initial product that we did want to make was a development kit for universities. So the idea is that we'd go into universities, we'd give them some development equipment, and that would kind of start them off learning about how cube satellites worked and how to program kind of mission software for them. And the idea that after those courses in the universities kind of got on their feet, and we'd provide them with like materials and things to help, make assessments and all of that, kind of like a pretty good commercial package. Then more projects would center around cube satellites within universities. And so then we'd start providing them with, aerospace grade equipment, and then they could start sending it to space. There's already a couple of universities in Australia that have projects in the kind of aerospace side going. So we knew that there was a market for buying aerospace equipment. And we thought that we could have a pretty cool contribution to that, seeing as everything at the moment was coming from overseas. Unfortunately, none of these projects really moved fast enough. And we started trying to look for some like secondary investors and started looking for, if we could make one of these projects move and like, get something a little bit bigger going to sustain the business. And it was starting to look really rough. Fortunately for us, one day, we kind of got into an agreement with another small startup to make some educational equipment. So part of the cube satellite system is you have like your communications, you have like your processing, all of those kinds of basic things. And then we made this kind of little testing board to put on top. The testing board just got like some atmospheric data and a couple of other like environmental sensors and things like that. And so it was just kind of like a little fun testing board for us. But when they saw it, they were like, wow, we could put this into classrooms and make a couple of lessons around it, just the testing board. And it would kind of like have this bit of a space feel to it. And, kids would probably think that was pretty cool. And we were like, yeah, okay, that sounds good. And so we kind of really rushed into that. And we did a lot of stuff on good faith because we thought that, you know, they were really excited, we were really excited. We talked a little bit about contracts and all of that, but we kind of needed to, for supply reasons, because they found some interested parties really fast, we really needed to like supply them with stuff as fast as possible. So we started developing our first product called the Asimov, the Create for Space kit. And yeah, I think we made about 60 of them, and those went out to schools, and that was really good. And then we started talking more with the other company a little bit about, you know, where do we go from here, and, you know, how can we further develop this relationship? And it just really broke down. Kind of the idea of like costs and things that we were thinking of around these kits didn't really work for them, and we just didn't really make much of a relationship. And that was pretty terrible for us. So I guess a bit of a lesson there was running into kind of those kinds of partnerships, just like all of, yay, we're all young startups and that'll be lots of fun, without having like contracts and that kind of just protection to make sure that like no one can hurt each other. That is super important, and we really learned that lesson the hard way. I keep spilling this water, I should just put it down. So from then on, we were kind of like a little bit of, we don't really know where to go. So we'd kind of gone a little bit into space, started talking to a couple of universities. We did this education thing, but that fell flat on its face. Then a local STEM educator by the name of Scott Sleep, if you're into STEM education in the area, he's a pretty big hero. So STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. So a couple of years ago, probably more than a couple now, some people realized that if we get those subjects in schools and we start munching them all together, it'll make for a lot more punch, because, you know, science and math enrollment rates were going down, mostly because they're pretty boring subjects when you teach them inside of a bubble. Like, engineering's really fun and cool, or at least it can be, and it totally involves heaps of math. So why not take some of the math from math class and do it in engineering? So a lot of that was kind of developing in the area, and someone came into our office one day and was like, we heard that you do space stuff, come show your kids our satellites. And so we went into a classroom with some Cube satellite equipment, and we started talking to the kids, and they really liked it. They thought it was heaps cool, and it kind of re-motivated us to get back into education. So we were like, so the other party we were with, they were making most of the educational materials, but we thought, hey, you know, we're all programmers, we just all did engineering. We can make a couple of materials to teach programming and teach about how some of this electronics works. It'll probably be fun. And so we started down the path in the kind of later half of 2016, to make an educational company. So we made our first kind of complete educational product called the StarLAB. So we got a Raspberry Pi and put some of our own electronics on it, and made some online courses in the programming language Python and with hardware programming. And we started testing that in local schools. Initial tests went really bad. So we kind of thought that more focusing on the science side of things would be fun. So like kind of merging electronics and science together. And so we made a couple of like science experiment type things that would be enhanced by electronics. It kind of just didn't really work because we weren't good enough at teaching the science. And so then when it came to like, you know, here's this data and like it explains how the pendulum's working, the kids just really didn't get it. And so we kind of talked to like a couple of teachers about how we could like maybe improve things. And it became pretty obvious that we should really be going down a robotics type path. People love robotics, and it kind of made it easier for us too to focus on the educational areas of the business. Mostly because like teaching things like scientific concepts within the scope of robotics, it just kind of automatically makes the whole experience a lot more engaging. So we started piloting some more robotics focused lessons in classrooms. We got these cool metal chassis from China, and we kind of like tank tread metal chassis, and we strapped our little StarLAB module to the front of them, and we're like, cool, now I can drive around. It's going to be a lot more fun and engaging for the kids. And I'll come back to the metal chassis soon because that's another disaster. And yeah, so that kind of, we were pretty happy with that as like a minimum viable product. We went for the New South Wales government MVP grant to help develop a lot of that. Really good grant if you want to make a minimum viable product. And yeah, so we got our first order at the end of that year for about 40 kits, which was pretty insane. We certainly didn't expect such a large response so quickly, and this local area is like absolutely amazing for doing things in education because there's a lot of like pioneers in the area, and there's this kind of thing in schools where you need like a champion teacher to do a lot of like cool stuff. So some schools in some areas, like, you know, maybe one or two will have like a program that they run where they get kids from lots of other schools to come in. But in the whole Newcastle area, you find that in most schools. Like there's just so many teachers around here that are really passionate about giving their kids a fantastic opportunity. And so we were able to like tap into that network and get a lot of demand really early. In some ways, it was really good because, you know, we had customers, we could start paying ourselves, which, you know, you have to pay yourself if you want to run a business. Otherwise, you know, if you can't live running a business, you just can't do it anymore. And that was pretty awesome. The non-awesome side of it was staying up like really late every single night, like working on the product, getting it connected to school networks, doing that development side of things. And that kind of made things pretty insane, but it was really nice knowing that what we were working on did have a place to go. Around the same time, we were still kind of dabbling in space. So this was still late 2016, and we were still looking at space stuff and figuring out, like, you know, can we still make something that goes to space? And we were kind of pivoting at that point, but kind of still trying to live in both worlds, and that was really hurting us. And so we made the decision to cut most of the space stuff, and that ultimately I think has been really useful. Like just focusing on one thing and trying to do it as best as possible, especially when it's making you money, because, you know, we had orders. It just made the most sense, and our business advisors were really happy that we'd stopped kind of distracting ourselves. So we have these metal rovers, and we have our StarLABs, and we're in schools. We have our first lot of online lessons. The first year went pretty smoothly. So 2016 was a pretty good year for the business. We did have our old CEO kind of disappear because he was more interested in the space side of things. So he went off to pursue the space sector. And so there was a little less of us, which kind of made things a bit more hectic. But in a good way, having less people on the team makes you, I guess, think harder about how to do things better, which was really good for us. So it kind of made us realize that, yeah, like instead of just doing things like how we were, we're going to need to save time. And that really pushed us to do things better rather than just how we were before. The education market in Newcastle is pretty good. It's got like a good mix between like low socioeconomic schools that I guess get a lot of grants and get a lot of external support, and then like wealthier schools that were more interested in buying our product outright with their own money. In terms of how the business developed for the rest of that year, it was mostly just kind of navigating a minefield of like different problems with schools and with the equipment. So that metal rover chassis that I was talking about that we were super happy with, and it kind of like solved all our problems, it kind of ended up being an extremely large pain because we ended up getting 50 of them later in the year to kind of, I guess, flesh out the product, because we kind of sent out the StarLABs to the schools with some online lessons. And then we would send out the rover later in the year as like a rover drop package and a bit of an expansion module. It turns out the 50 that we got later in the year, they were all like kind of bent at different angles and stuff. And so because we designed a 3D printed bracket to put onto them so that we could attach our StarLAB to the front. But because all the metal was bent at different angles, the brackets just didn't fit. And we would have to kind of like try and like bend them back into place a little bit. And they also had like little motors for the wheels, and only about 20% of those worked. And then like trying to ring up a Chinese factory and say like, this doesn't work and I want my money back is a pretty awful experience. Yeah. I guess you kind of pay for what you get. I guess I've learned that definitely the hard way. In terms of like China and different things that we've ordered from China over time, it's a really interesting place in terms of product quality. You can pay them to do everything and they'll do a fantastic job on it. So later on, we kind of learned that, you know, can you do testing? Oh yeah, of course we can do testing. And like, can you do like reassurance, and can you like put things like can you like do packaging, and just they'll do absolutely everything, and they can test things to like really good quality. It's just that if you don't arrange all of those things with their engineers and stuff, they'll just give you exactly what you ask for at the lowest possible cost. So that was a fun learning experience for us as well. Just their kind of different ideas about quality control, and you know, because they just assume that if you buy a whole bunch of things to sell to people that, you know, you're going to test them first, which was fun for us. So we started 3D printing almost as much as possible, which was a lot of fun. So, you know, making good use of that small scale manufacturing process. So in 2017, we launched with kind of a bit of a spruced up online learning platform. We got some more teachers to come in and work on the online learning platform, provide a lot more feedback on lesson content, integrate a lot of the feedback we got from lesson content from the previous year. And yeah, so 2017 was kind of like our first proper year. So we had our 3D printed rovers. We were going to have our big rover challenge at the end of the year, which was going to be a really interesting test for us. So after all the teachers went through all of the content, all of their students would get together and kind of test out the rovers on this cool Mars terrain that we made. So that was kind of like the big looming thing at the end of the year. Throughout the year, I guess we started trying to pitch more to try and attract investors. And that's been a really interesting experience. So in terms of the investor market in Newcastle, it's been pretty hard for us. So I guess there's not been many people around here interested in kind of like a hardware startup like we are. But in terms of the support we've gotten for like advising on new business, advising on pitching and all of those kinds of things, we found that support in this area has been absolutely phenomenal. So we went through a startup course with the Business Center, which is a local group that does that kind of thing. And that opened up a lot of opportunities for us. And we've certainly had some talks with the university about different events, and it's just been really great talking to a lot of people in this area about that. And so 2017 was a lot about just trying to make the business work a lot better, which also meant that we kind of lost a little bit more staff, which was kind of good and bad. It's never fun kind of sitting down with someone that you founded a company with and saying, you know, I really don't think this is kind of working. And yeah, so it's kind of been like, I guess, emotional ups and downs throughout 2017. Doing legal stuff as a startup is pretty horrible. So some of the involvements we had with that early startup, we did that educational program with, that kind of came to bite us back legally a little bit. It was just kind of like a couple of letters back and forth. it is pretty scary, like having a business and then just kind of wondering, oh my gosh, we've gotten this legal letter. Is it like all going to explode overnight? But, you know, you pay some lawyers a lot of money and they write some other legal letters and you feel a lot better at the end of the day. And really it's not that bad. Like, as long as something doesn't go to court, which people keep telling me you never want to do because it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's pretty fine. So throughout the rest of that year, we were pretty happy with how the product was going. The hours were kind of starting to get better because we'd done a lot of the initial development, and it was more about like, how can we get this product to other areas? That's still something that's remained difficult for us, just like cracking into different geographies. We learned that one of the reasons why what we were doing in New South Wales was working so well is because New South Wales was kind of a couple of years behind in implementing STEM programs within schools. And the reason why it was working super well in Newcastle is because our local regional development, Australia, had kind of made it their thing. So a little bit of sidetrack about regional development Australias. There's heaps of them all over Australia, and they have a lot of autonomy, so they can kind of do almost whatever they want. And so ours just decided to really get into STEM education. And that's what made it kind of so successful for us in this area. And so as we kind of started understanding why we were successful in our market, it kind of scared us a little bit because we were like, oh, well, you know, this doesn't really exist in other places. And then when we started looking in other states, they were quite a few years ahead in terms of adopting STEM programs in their schools. And so it's been a little bit of a challenge for us to break into other state markets, although we do have like a scattering of schools that we kind of acquired. In terms of customer acquisition and marketing, everyone that started the company was an electrical engineer, and trying to get electrical engineers to pick up a phone and talk to people is horrendous, myself included. And so that was kind of just an ongoing problem for us. And so we'd kind of alternate between trying to find people to sell a lot of products to all at once, and then going, okay, this is like kind of hard, or, you know, these talks are still ongoing with this council or something like that. And then trying to do like our marketing campaigns. And that's kind of always been a problem for the company, like just doing that like face-to-face marketing and like getting into schools and trying to market to teachers. But we started kind of latching on to more events during that year. And when you go to some sort of like educational event and you set up all your cool robots and stuff, you have everyone coming to you saying like, tell me about this, and like asking lots of questions, which kind of made everything a lot easier for us. Definitely, like if you are a startup that goes into some sort of like more fundamental business of like providing a direct market with, you know, some sort of equipment or something like that, there's definitely lots of like trade shows and events for so many different areas, and that can be a great way to find like customers to trial things on. And that was kind of a really helpful realization for us, because we realized that when we go to these events, you don't just find like teachers that are just like, yeah, okay, I just need some like robots for my classroom. A lot of teachers that go to those kinds of events are like the super engaged ones, and the kind of teachers that just really like love that kind of stuff. And so we were able to like test some different product ideas, kind of realize that diversifying our product range really early was like a super terrible idea, because there were still like little bits and pieces we had to work on and improve our product throughout 2017. And yeah, so towards the end of 2017, we'd kind of solved a lot of technical problems that we had in schools, which is still an ongoing nightmare. I don't know why schools change their IT systems so often. We even talk to teachers and they're like, yeah, we had this fantastic IT system and now there's this new one and it doesn't work. And it's like, well, I don't know why you did that and I can't help you. So that's a pretty common problem that we have. But finally, at the end of the year, we got to our Mars rover challenge, and having, I think it was like 160 kids at the university forum, or using your robots, or using knowledge that they'd learned throughout the year from your online lessons. That was pretty freaking amazing. And definitely there was kind of like an aura going up to it, you know, of like, this is terrible, we should probably stop, just because like there's a lot of hard work. And you know, we don't go into classrooms, like we sell our product to teachers to deliver it. And so we don't get to see, or we didn't get to see a lot of, I guess, students pretty much ever. And so having like all of those students in a room, participating in the challenge, having heaps of fun, sharing lots of ideas, really doing like software engineering and robotics engineering, that was awesome to see. And that really inspired us to kind of keep going at it, I guess. Certainly in terms of like income, things were still like a little bit rough. And, you know, as a startup starts up, it's always going to be like a little bit, you know, ebbs and flows, especially as you understand like market buying cycles and all of that. You know, when you should try and sell to schools, because when they get their budget, that was an interesting lesson for us to learn, because, you know, we started doing like marketing at weird times during the year, and then teachers were like, yeah, I don't have money right now, so maybe call back later. And we're like, oh, okay. And you know, that's when we needed money, because that's what was encouraging us to do the marketing. And that was a pretty scary time as well. But fortunately, our investor was still happy to seed fund us a little bit more to kind of just kick things over. And so we were still kind of dipping into that pot for a little bit, but eventually we stopped, which was really good, just because, you know, like as a test for us to really become self-sufficient was a pretty nice feeling. So 2018 rolls along this year, and we were trying to apply as much as possible from what we'd done the previous year to the new year. So we started doing like a lot more development on the rover kit itself, trying to make it, I guess, like more robust, a little bit more fun for schools, which a bit of a downside of that, it kind of ended up taking longer to assemble at the end, which, because we assemble everything ourselves, still turned out to be kind of a nightmare, which we're still slowly fixing throughout this year. Definitely, if you ever design something to sell to a lot of people, it's just so crazily important if you're doing it yourself, because it's still like kind of a minimum viable product evolving, that features are great, but also it not taking inordinate amounts of time to assemble is just really, really, really great. So we're starting to talk to like some people in China about, you know, them assembling little bits and pieces to make things easier for us. And pretty much every single time we sit down to do something, we're just trying to make it take less time, because the more time we have to like do business stuff and to talk to councils or to talk to any kind of interested party, like that's just so much more valuable. Cool things that have happened this year, we started running a lot more events, because it was really good for us and really good for schools as well, because schools love having something practical to take the kids to and to like rev them up about, because it's like, you know, if you do all of these lessons, you get to go to this cool event and do some fun stuff. And it was also good for us to see more students like using our equipment, because it keeps us motivated. We also learned that there are a fair few teachers that have to kind of do programming education all of a sudden. So it's been a pretty big thing in the New South Wales education system that STEM's kind of exploding at the moment. And there's a mandatory STEM course that's coming in next year that most other states have. I'm pretty sure every other state has. Anyway, it's coming for us next year, and that's kind of like a big scary thing for a lot of teachers at the moment, because they have to kind of get, you know, 3 to 4 years programming experience in a couple of months, and teachers are some of the most time poor people we've met. So we started doing professional development for teachers, which was a really good like kind of side income stream for the business. It was kind of nice to be doing something else within the business that was still related to our core focus, like, you know, STEM education in schools, rather than, you know, something like space, which if we try and spend any time on was just mainly a distraction at that point anyway. And so we started offering a professional development course. After running like a couple of like coding workshops with teachers, we learned that they have this professional accreditation system. And so we realized that, hey, if we like get our course professionally accredited, that's going to make it more valuable to teachers. And so we did that, and we started offering accredited development to teachers. And that kind of has really helped grow the company, because, you know, if a teacher comes in and we teach them how to code, especially if we teach them how to use our equipment, it makes them a lot more interested in our whole product offering. Yeah, a couple of other challenges we faced along the way. Pricing was kind of a really interesting thing for us. I still don't, to be honest, completely understand how the price of our product works in a way. So we kind of just sat down one day and we kind of looked at how much it costs, and, you know, kind of tried to figure out how much we could make from selling it. And we came up with a number, and it's just always been that number. And I kind of wonder how much we should change it, and like, you know, would people buy two, but they're buying one at the moment, and maybe they'll just still buy one, and then we'll get less money. And that kind of like pricing way of how pricing works, and like how that kind of drives demand, and how, you know, people are interested in things because they're expensive, and then people are interested in things, aren't interested in things because they're cheap. And that's still a bit of a problem for us, and I really don't know how to work it out in some ways with the school market, because we have a lot of schools in the local area that are like, this is crazy, we can't afford this. And then there's like another really big group of schools that are like, yep, that's fine. And then we have a fair few schools, not too many in this local area. It becomes more of a problem as we start going into Sydney. There's like, this is just ridiculously cheap, just go away, it can't be worth anything. And so kind of trying to come up with like more of a tiered system, and how that works with our product is being a continuous challenge for us. We're hoping to kind of sort something out towards the end of this year. We have a couple of ideas, mostly from the administrative side of selling something that has like a hardware component and a kind of subscription component to the online learning materials, and trying to bundle that all up at once. And also battling schools' sales systems, and how the Catholic system is different from the public system, and then you've got like private schools that also have their own system. That's kind of just been a bit of an insane minefield. And then of course the New South Wales state government changed how all the public schools worked at the start of this year. So everything that we'd learned kind of painfully about buying cycles has suddenly changed this year. But we're kind of, you know, making more contacts and figuring out who to talk to about these kinds of things. Definitely the most important part for running a business, probably like every single business, is just trying to find like interesting people within your area, because there's just so much information to learn about, like, you know, like how schools buy things, for example, and when they buy things. And there's people that just know all of that. And so if you can make some friends and like go to some events and meet those kinds of people, it's just the most valuable thing for the business. And it's really saved us in a lot of ways. Like talking to local STEM education people in this area has literally made our company. We wouldn't be here without the support of just local teachers that really liked us and gave us a hand early on. Yeah.
Any questions? I've got a few. They're
Sweet.
not hard questions.
Great. I love questions.
So, in the last year,
Yep.
Australia's tried to sort of ramp up their funding for organising the space agency.
Yes.
And we've had like companies like Rocket Lab who are demonstrating that it's a lot cheaper to send CubeSats or satellites into space.
Yep.
As opposed to 30 years ago when it was like hundreds of thousands of dollars to send a satellite into space.
Yep.
Are you still going to try and ride that wave, since there's funding put into the agency for something to happen the next couple of years for CubeSats, or you kind of put it on the back burner for now?
Yeah, so we are. So it's been pretty interesting seeing like how much like external supports come in for the space industry. I guess when we were there, it was really easy to get demoralized like we did about it, because things were kind of just starting to ramp up, and, you know, we needed money to pay the bills. so because we kind of do that STEM education thing and we theme a lot of our stuff around space, we're going to try and like tap into little pockets of that money to run kind of like space education programs in schools. And we have had some initial success with that. I can't talk about it yet because it's still kind of just like finalizing the details, but yeah, it's really interesting that, and plus everyone kind of still remembers us as a space company because we're like the only people crazy enough to do hardware, or one of. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I kind of found out about you guys.
Okay.
Just like a few years ago.
Yep.
And just a couple other questions too. So you're kind of like the only people that I know that are sort of really pushing the whole robotics and STEM education thing. Do you have any other competitors, do you think, that are kind of in that sort of market?
In a way, yeah. So there's like a lot of STEM equipment that teachers use in schools at the moment, like Lego Mindstorm and Sphero and like a lot of stuff like that. Definitely that all of like the buying of all of that equipment comes out of like the same budget that we would sell to the schools. So it's definitely like a competitor. In terms of what we offer though, I'm going to say no. So our biggest focus is creating like a lesson pack that maps to the curriculum and kind of making it all into one kind of package tailor-made for the education system. And why I think that's really important and why that doesn't have a lot of competition is because it's really just starting to take off like STEM in schools at the moment. And a lot of the people that are doing it, a lot of the teachers don't have kind of like that lifelong experience. And so the kind of teachers that are using like electronics like Arduino or Sphero in schools at the moment are more like hobbyist background. And so we really cater to any teacher that wants to deliver STEM in the classroom. And I haven't seen something else that does that. And hopefully it stays that way.
Right, yeah. And just with your final year project, what was that based on? Was that kind of like going into the CubeSat hardware, yep, or was it just completely different?
So my friend's final year project was the CubeSat orientated one that kind of became the catalyst for this business. And yeah, so it was based on kind of just making a testing ground for CubeSat equipment, with kind of the intention for it to be low budget and perhaps launched, kind of like a little bit of a ever running tangent. I made a musical Tesla coil as my final year project, which was pretty fun. And I haven't been able to make one to put into schools yet because I just don't want to have to deal with that OH&S nightmare.
Right. And lastly, just like obviously you started doing work in the CubeSat sort of industry. Is there anything up in space, or is it just anything that you know of that's been used by other companies?
There may have been some designs that were used by another company. We can't be 100% sure, and it's kind of like a bit of a contentious subject. So, yeah.
What was the motivation coming out of finding a project and being like, we want to go and start a space startup? Like, what was the?
So it was a little bit of. It was really hard to find a job at the time in electrical engineering. It was kind of like that promise, you know, going into the degree, you know, like electrical engineers, super high demand right now. And then by the time we finished, it was like, yep, all that demand's been filled up. What are you doing here? Which was terrible. And then I guess there was just kind of like a hole at the end of the year because me and my friend had done our FYP in such a way that we'd finished in June. And so we were like, let's just try talking to some people, going to some pitch events at the end of the year. And when we got seed funding pretty early, which was just insane, we realized that, hey, we could actually do this. And just because the opportunity was there, and you know, if you're not doing a lot and a cool opportunity comes along, you hold on to that. Yeah.
You mentioned that you hadn't spent much time with the students who were using your equipment and going through your courses, and not until they'd actually worked from campus, you'd seen the tangible effects of what you guys were doing. Since then, have you decided to spend more time interacting with the kids and teachers, or with the kids, to one, learn about how they're working with your product, and two, just get that joy?
Yeah, we try and go into schools a lot more often now, and we've had a lot more events this year. So we started like doing little hackathons early on to kind of get the students prepared for the end of the year. And that's been really fantastic for us. On the other hand, it's also been like really hectic for us, because organizing events where you get like 30 different schools to come to is a special type of hell. But probably the benefits in how effective it is in the school, and also how fun it is for us, I think are worth it. Still playing around with the idea of how many events I want to hold next year, but probably a similar amount. Yeah. And yeah, definitely doing teacher development is really fun as well. Like, teachers are really cool to work with, because they're like the super engaged students, except they're all like that, because they're like, freaking tell me how to use this stuff and how to code, because I have to teach 30 kids tomorrow how to code. And so like doing lessons with those and PD is also a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Lewis, thank you so much for coming this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.